Hi, my name is Confession Page. You are seeing me in the appearance of a Facebook page. That's kind of correct, but not enough. Originally, I may have become a page just like the other ones on Facebook, but some people called the founders scam. They paired me with another partner, usually a firm from Google, and put me into a digital apparatus called Confession. Our life mission is to help people voice their secrets, their sharing, or whatever they want to say to the big community. Normally, the confession writers will come and input their content to my partner. He helps collect all the confessions and store them in a database. Then the administrators, also known as the founders, will help host those confessions to my interface. Confessions like me have two defining characteristics. One is anonymity, and the other is locality. Anonymity is a vital aspect of me and of other confessions. We collect the content from the writers without interviewing or asking them who they are. This is the central feature that makes the society recognize me as a confession. It is interesting, yet controversial, so I would love to talk more about it later. By locality, I mean each of us is purposely created to serve a certain group of people, usually the community of a university, a high school, or so on. It is directly reflected on my name. And I am also local in the sense that although I am widely approachable, most of the time, only the people who belong to or are interested in my targeted community do input and interact with me. Even when I was born with no wicked intentions, there are people hating me. They accuse me of causing cyberbullying, triggering violence in educational environment, blah blah blah. But there are also people supporting me since I create a safe place for them to share and to speak out what they found inconvenient to share under their own identities. The academia looks at me from different perspectives, and I guess they will have many things to talk about me. Mr. Michel Foucault, in his influential work, Discipline and Punishment, emphasized the function of surveillance and discipline in the modern society. His famous example of the panopticon points out how the perception of being watched would make people behave in discipline. Lillian et al. Has elaborated more on this idea. They argue that in the internet era, the legendary panopticon now turns into an omniopticon, a kind of participatory panopticon where the many watch the many. People voluntarily expose their personal information, and people are not only watched by the state, but also by others. Then you may ask, where does I appear in this literature, right? To counter the above-mentioned surveillance, here comes my life mission. Mr. Raymond Williams, from the perspective of a technological determinist, would justify my birth as a technology selected and facilitated by certain social forces, and then turn back to influence the society, sets the conditions for social change and progress. I especially like Bruno Latour. He looks at confession pages like me not as blank pages just like the others, but as unique actants that enable and limit certain possibilities. And Miss Bonnie Nardi, her fascinating concept of affordance somewhat speaks to Latour's idea that it is because I am structurally designed in certain ways, so I can generate possible actions that mediate certain communicating activities and contribute in shaping my community's culture. Putting myself in the interactions with the community I was born to serve, while many people accuse me of causing cyberbullying or violence, Ms. Elena Gershon would employ the concepts of media ideology and idioms of practice to argue that I am just a medium being designated to mediate the connections or the communications among different stakeholders in my community. What is displayed on my facade does not come from myself, but from other people who use my platform to speak for their personal stories. And choosing me to publish their story partly reflects their media ideologies about how I should be used. Here is Mr. Ronald Neeson. In Human Rights 3.0, he points out that social networks, as a platform, very potentially reinforces the tendency toward emotion as a substitution for truth. Well, I have to admit that I am not immune from this. Despite that negative side, I still see my potential in becoming something that Neeson called community of affirmation, where marginalized individuals can find a way to involve themselves into their community in the material world. In the presentation of self, Mr. Irving Goffman regards selfhood and identity as something that are not fixed, but performed contextually and based on a set of beliefs or assumptions. What he said is very explicit in my case, where anonymity is widely upheld. Identities are possibly blurred, and most people are able to curate the selves they want to present to the community. So that's what people talk about me. Now I invite you to come a little bit closer to take a look at me. Let me first tell you about my name. Originally, according to the Cambridge Dictionary, the term confession refers to the act of admitting that you have done something wrong or illegal, or a religious practice that a Christian tells formally and privately that they have done wrong. However, the confession in my name is semantically different in the notion of Vietnamese people. Most Vietnamese people had not known this word until when the confession pages trend in the world reached to Vietnam in the years of 2011 and 2012. Although it is a new loan word, Vietnamese youngsters did not adopt the original meanings. Instead, they built their own notions about the word confession, which is fundamentally inspired and influenced by the confession pages trend. At the core, all confession pages keep locality and anonymity as defining features. Beside publicizing confessions, some big pages may sometimes post additional topics like advertisements, entertaining posts, or made-up stories to create more interactions within the page community. As I act as an open space, the administrators try to regulate the way other people interact with me by setting up certain conventions. Most of the rules are explicitly shown on my introduction tab or in the first part of the Google form used to collect confessions. By offering certain categories in which the writer can write about, the topics and content is framed to maintain the locality and the relevance to the targeted community. It creates oriented possibilities while imposes certain limitations on the input. The language being employed by the admins in introductions or regulations also represents their attitude, their expectations towards the content. Although it is very nuanced and subtle, in the long term, it helps set the tone and the overarching spirit for the page. Here comes, I think, the most important thing about me. Many people mistakenly think that the only ways they can interact with me are to write or to read confessions. But in fact, I would like to argue that I myself is much more than that. By affording different levels and modes of anonymity, I do set up several platforms for different stakeholders to engage in certain communities. First, even when I am generally regarded as the public digital space, there are various extents of public that I can afford. When one submits a confession, he or she consciously chooses to share it to the identified public who follow that page. This group closely related to the public who belong to or are interested in that physical community. When the confession is posted, one reader highly resonating with that content can choose to share it on his wall. By clicking and choosing the option to share with friends, he shares it to the restricted public, announces specifically to the relations within his network about the post. He does not know who will particularly see the post, but he accepts the chance that everyone within the established network possibly see it. Most popular to everyone is reacting or commenting to a confession post. By intentionally choose one from the provided icons to react, the confession readers choose to reveal to the identified public of the page about their identity and their attitudes or opinions towards the confession content. Usually, the major reactions shown at the left bottom of the post would indicate the public's attitude towards the confessing content. This is critical in the context of controversial topics, where reactions generalize and represent the vote or the support for certain stances. The same can be applied to a comment. And here comes the real risk that Mr. Nielsen has said that netizens regard emotion as a substitution for truth. Then, in response to the several publics being afforded, there are also different levels of anonymity that different stakeholders can employ to expose themselves to the respective communities. To the confession writers, also known as the initiator, the absolute anonymity is provided. They just need to go to the form displayed in the introduction of the page, fill out the form, and submit without leaving any traces of their identity. Or else, the writers can put their name into the content to reveal the identities they want to present to the public. They also have the choice to reveal the identity to the admins by sending private confessing message to the page's inbox instead of filling the form. This way is applied when one wants to use the credible identity of an individual or the organization to make an announcement to the page followers. To the page's admin, the facilitators, it is widely accepted that the admin's identities are secured. They prefer using fixed nicknames to post confessions as a way to humanize the confession system and to communicate with the followers. To the commenters or the reactors, If one wants to participate in the confession posts, he can choose to react or comment with the attached identity. However, if one wants to hide or replace the inherent identity, they can communicate via clone accounts. These accounts usually bear the names representing the identities they would like to present to the public. Most of them are ridiculous, like a page created just for commenting around or the nosy one. Comments from these accounts are normally accepted in the way that it is not being questioned, rejected, or banned by the admins or the other members. Especially, they are usually the ones receiving the most reactions. It leads to the possibility that these participants intentionally fake an identity to critically respond to the confession. So far, I have been showing you multiple levels and modes of anonymity that I provide. With them, I can create various ways in which different stakeholders, like the admin, confession writers, or the followers, can engage with both the online and physical communities by initiating, facilitating, or participating in the conversations related to the community. I hope that telling my story would help you get to know more about me and understand the rationale for the powerful development of my family, the other confession pages in the recent years. As young internet users, you can be aware of the available options and get a strategy to best engage with these online communities. In my last words, there is one question I would like to invite you to think with me is that how can I help involve the marginalized or vulnerable groups of people into the conversations within the communities better? That's all for today. Thank you for listening.